Hello, I hope you're all having a good day. This is David speaking. Today I'm going to walk you through how to create a skybox for use inside of Unreal Engine. So we're going to start off here with an image document of this size here, 16,384 by 12,288 RGB 8-bit. Now in order to be able to paint the skybox, we're going to need to do some basic formatting of the document here. What I'm going to do to start is create a rectangle, make it 4096 by 4096, so a square. And then using the move tool with snap enabled and rulers enabled, I'm going to move this square into the corner here. And what I'm going to start to do is drag out guides from the ruler and snap them along the edges of the square like this. We'll end up with 5 guidelines, and then it's good to add an extra one in the very middle of the document where it snaps here. That's going to be the horizon line in your skybox. It's good to know where the divide is between the bottom of the horizon and things above the horizon when you're painting. So I can go ahead and delete this rectangle and start painting the skybox. One of the first things that I like to do is using the gradient tool. Create a gradient going from one of the intersection points here down to this one, and you'll find that it snaps when you have snap enabled. You can change the colors on this since it's a non-destructive gradient. You might have like a reference you're working from, you can grab colors from that, or I guess just try things out. Use some colors that you like. Something like that is fine. Also, these little diamond shaped gizmo things, they're fall off controls, so you can use them to control where the gradient falls off to the next color, which can be useful if you're trying to get like a very specific gradation. Okay, cool. Once that's all set, what I start doing is painting clouds. I try to do these layer by layer. For example, like one cloud element will be, each individual cloud element should be on its own layer so that they can be modified and controlled independently of each other in order to be able to iterate more effectively. So I have a cloud brush pack here that I downloaded from the internet. I don't remember the name of this, but I did find it like on the first page of my search. You just search Photoshop cloud brushes. There should be some free brushes for you to download if needed. If you plan on painting this from scratch, that's also, of course, acceptable. Keep in mind that this is quite a large document. Basically, what the player sees when looking to the horizon is this one of these cells, one of these faces of the cube map. So you could imagine if this were the horizon and beneath that is like the floor or the ground rather, you could kind of gauge what size of clouds you should have. You can maybe play around with this, and again, this can be iterated on as you create your skybox and test it in engine, and then go back and edit it, etc. For now, I'll just go ahead and put some clouds in here. So something like this could be interesting. Now, I did put them all on one layer, but basically these are going to stay where they are. I might need to adjust the height of them or the size of them. But I guess for now, all of these being on one layer should be okay. Now I am going to create a new layer so that I can show how to tile things across the is the rear facing component of the cube map. You could tile them across to the X positive here. For example, I'll take this cloud, maybe make it smaller. And then there's this filter in filter other called offset. Now you can offset things by a pixel amount. And when you do that and it crosses the edge of the canvas here, it'll render right on the other side of the canvas. So if I typed in like 1,000 or something, maybe 1,500, you can see that the cloud goes from one side to the other, and you don't have to worry about repairing like a seam or anything like that. Looking at these, they might be a little large and kind of high up on the horizon. So I might want to lower them a little bit. Maybe something like that. That's the basics of a skybox. Depending on what your needs are or the art direction, you would have to do more to this. Maybe paint buildings and mountains or stars. Maybe the clouds need to be more painterly, etc. Whatever you paint on here is what's going to show up in engine. So you want to make sure that you take your time creating this asset, especially since it's displayed quite large. You can add a ton of detail to this. But for now, I'm going to leave it like this so that I can show you guys how to create really quickly the format that's required for skyboxes in Unreal Engine. We're going to use an application by NVIDIA called the Texture Tools plugin in order to convert our long image here that we're going to make into a cube map. For Unreal Engine, it's required that you place each one of these faces with this orientation in this specific order. Otherwise, it won't display properly. And this is especially so because in Unreal Engine, we use Z-axis as the up and down axis instead of Y. And you'll see when we import it into Texture Tools that it looks a little different. In order to render these out, I'm going to need to rasterize this gradient layer so that it doesn't reformat, because I'll be exporting each one of these cube map faces separately. Now the ones that get exported, these are the faces that get exported. Here we got Z up, Z down, X positive, X negative, Y positive, Y negative. it'll wrap around the entire level and sort of serve as the background for your scene. So once I have my gradient rasterized, I got my clouds where I want them. I actually have a script that I wrote really quickly. I mean, it's pretty simple, but what it does is export the cube map faces individually as 4K by 4K images. So I here have a name for it already. I'm going to call it Evergreen Skybox. I'm going to hit OK. And then it'll ask me where I want to export these. I'm going to choose my Skybox tutorial folder. And it'll start exporting each separate face as its own image. Cool, all faces saved with prefix Evergreen Skybox. So now that that's done, there's a second part to the script, which is the arrange cube map portion. I have to point to the folder that I have my images in, which should be the Skybox tutorial. When I select that folder, what it'll do is arrange the separate faces of the cube map in the format that Unreal is asking for, with their proper rotations. So you can see here that it's exactly formatted in this manner. Plus x minus x plus y minus y plus z minus z. Now once this is done, it's basically ready for export. I'll show you guys where to place the scripts when you download them. So you want to find your Photoshop folder. Go to the Photoshop folder. You'll go to Presets, Scripts. Here you can find all the scripts that come with Photoshop, and if you've added any, they'll also be in here. Just go ahead and throw in the two downloaded ones, Arrange Cube Map and Export Cube Map. And you should be able to use them. You might have to browse for them when you use them for the first time. So when you go to File Scripts, you might not see them in this recent scripts menu. Just hit browse and then point to your scripts folder where I just showed you where to install them. And then you'll have to select the script. So I'm going to export this image. I'm going to call it the Evergreen Skybox. We're going to have to wait on that. Meanwhile, I could show you guys where to get this tool that we're going to use. If you go to this URL here, https developer.nvidia.com/texture tools exporter, you'll need to make an account in order to download this. So you might have to hit join up here and log in or register for an NVIDIA account. Once that's done, you can download the standalone application, which allows you to launch it from your desktop and modify images and export them using the tools provided within the software. One of them being the creation of cube maps, of course. So it looks like we have this uploaded, rather exported, and I'm going to open NVIDIA Texture Tools. First, as you can see here, this is the image format that we need to be using to export our DDS file for use as a texture cube inside of Unreal Engine. 32 bits per channel. Or is that 32 bits? We can click on that and see what. Basically, you'll find this option up here. As you could see, if you go to Format and you scroll down to the 8888 RGBA 32 unsigned, click that one. Our texture type will be a cube map, color map as the image type. Uncheck generate bitmaps if you have that checked. And that should be all you need to do. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is drag our formatted Skybox image into the texture tools exporter. You might find that it may be too large for your system. You can always resize this. It looks like it's still processing it though. We'll see what happens. If not, what I'll have to go ahead and do is resize this by half. And so I'm going to try again. I actually have a preset here for the cube map format. It's a good idea once you have the settings down to save it as a preset so you don't have to keep doing this. I'll drag in the Skybox once again. And there we have it. So as you can see, because of Unreal Engine's use of Z as the up and down axis, you'll find that the Skybox is displayed sideways, sort of, but that's not a problem. Once you get it into the engine, you'll find that it is, with the correct orientations. Now inside of the texture tools exporter, you kind of just want to make sure that there's no seams. There really shouldn't be any unless you moved something around and changed its, I guess, location in between two of the cube map faces. Just make sure that you don't have any visible seams or any sort of artifacts, especially along the edges of the cube map, because it's prone to, artifacts. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to save this. Now when we save this, we're going to name it Evergreen Skybox. The format we need to save it as, file type, is DDS. Should be that second one there. And we'll save that. And now we can go into Unreal Engine. Now in Unreal Engine, in order to use HDRIs, there's a plugin that needs to be enabled. Well, this sort of makes it easier for you to use a backdrop HDRI. So enable this plugin. It will prompt you to restart the editor. You'll have to go ahead and restart it. It might have to build shaders again, so just wait for that. Once you're back in the engine, we're able to place the HDRI Backdrop blueprint. So if you go to quick place here, quick add, and search HDRI, you'll find the HDRI Backdrop blueprint, which can then be dragged into the scene. Now, first of all, you'll see that it already comes with a cube map. It sort of gives you an idea of how this works, right? It's like an image that's wrapped around, and you can view it from inside the geometry. First thing I'll do here is maybe lower the location 5 meters or so, just to not have that, the Z-plane fighting with the ground here. If that's happening, just lower the cube map until it's like not clipping through your terrain. The size can also be modified, maybe 35,000, something like that. You could see that the atmosphere and height fog components affect the colors on the cube map. which is kind of interesting. You can mess around with that. First thing we will do is go to our content folder. Here I created a folder called textures. Just right click, create new folder. I called it textures, Skybox. I already have one in here from a previous attempt. I'm actually going to delete this and import our Skybox. Interesting. So that's the wrong one. Hold on. Okay. So here we have our Skybox in engine as a texture cube. So your compression settings can be kept as default, and this is to ensure that we have sRGB enabled. We don't need to set this as an HDR due to not having gone outside of the 0 to 1 range when authoring the image. So that's basically all set. The one thing you do want to make sure of is that it does not MIP. So here at the top at level of detail, go to your MIP gen settings and hit no MIP maps and save the asset. Now if we click on the Skybox, or if we point to it in the outliner, click on the blueprint, we can actually drag in our newly created Skybox into the scene. Now you see at where the faces of the cube map meet, it does have like this angular warping to it. So when you're authoring the cube map, you kind of have to keep in mind that this will happen. Maybe avoid having like large sections going across the edges of the faces of the cube map in order to mitigate this sort of warping along the corners. This is something that can naturally happen due to the projection of the cube map onto the geometry serving as the environment dome, or the Skybox cube geometry. And basically you want to author it in a way that mitigates accentuating the artifacts that may be generated along the edges of the cube map. So like in this example, you could avoid having shapes that connect across the edges of the cube map in order to not have this warping along the corners. So now we have our cube map in engine here. You could see that as I change the size, it sort of gets lighter or darker, and this is due to it interacting with the sky atmosphere and exponential height fog components. If there's a skylight already in your scene, that can be deleted, because inside of HDRI Backdrop blueprint, it does have a skylight component. And in here, you can actually specify the cube map to be captured by the skylight. Once again, drag the same one in there, and you can see that it grabs colors from that cube map as information for the skylight component. Intensity can still be adjusted. You can even modulate the light color for different effects, depending on what the project calls for. There's also an intensity slider. This is sort of for the brightness of the skybox. Depending on the time of day, maybe you can sort of lower the intensity, maybe boost it a little bit. And that's basically all there is to it. Now, what's nice about the way that this cube map image is generated is that I can actually iterate on my work here. Let's say I want to make more clouds. I'll make some lighter shade ones. Maybe. Like background clouds, maybe, like very small ones. changing their sizes, maybe adding some sort of depth by having smaller clouds and larger clouds. Maybe you can add a bit of depth to the skybox. Cool. So let's say we just added a bunch more clouds. We added some detail to our skybox. Maybe we even want to change the color of the sky or the horizon here. So if you modify the gradient, it'll have to be duplicated and rasterized again so that it's no longer non-destructive when you're exporting. So here we're using my export cube map script with the same name. I'll hit OK. Make sure it's the same folder. All faces saved. If I go back to my linked cube map, you could see that it'll update accordingly. This is due to the script having imported each one of these as a linked image. What's cool about this is that as you work on your canvas here, doing your hand painting, using the export script, you can keep iterating on it and it'll automatically update inside of your linked cube map document so that you don't have to do this by hand at all. Once you want to test an iteration in Engine, you just hit export with the script and these separate faces will update accordingly. And this is because they're linked. So I can export this again. Now back in Texture Tools Exporter, if I hit open here and reopen the skybox, as you can see, the image has been updated. We can save it as, well, we can overwrite the DDS file we created earlier. And then what this allows us to do is go into Unreal Engine, and when we re-import this, it'll have our updated cube map. And you can keep doing this, iterating and testing in Engine, going back into Photoshop, maybe you need to change a gradient or add more components to the scene. Maybe I want to add different kinds of, maybe some like brush strokes or something. Make sure that snap is disabled while you're painting brushstrokes onto the canvas in order to avoid having your mouse attached to the guidelines or snap to them while you're painting. Boom. See, you could see that it gets updated automatically, and then when we export this and render out our DDS file, or export our DDS file, it becomes not so much of an arduous task when you don't have to arrange the faces by hand every time you do something different to the skybox. But once I have my updated map in here, and save again, overwrite my file, back in Unreal Engine, I can re-import my file, and you can see that it updates with my little squiggles. Wonderful. So this setup combined with a landscape and some good trees and foliage can give you a pretty convincing sky Even though it's not really procedural like the volumetric clouds, I believe you could still add volumetric clouds to this. You would have to increase the size of the skybox. You could still have clouds in here, and then you can mess with the volumetric cloud shader to get like the look you're going for. Maybe I want like sparse clouds. I think I was messing with this already. I'll reset these settings. So there's a lot to experiment with here. By modifying the parameters of this shader and iterating on your skybox and using your atmosphere and volumetric fog in conjunction, they can create pretty interesting backdrops for your scenes. And that's pretty much all there is to it. We can go ahead and call it here. I hope you guys found this useful or informative, and hope you guys have fun creating skyboxes. Hopefully some of this information will have helped you improve your scene in some way. And I'll be more than happy to hear if you learned something new from this tutorial/guide. Thank you for your time and have a nice day, everybody.